Hey everybody. So today I'm here to talk about the current state of UK politics and more specifically the position that the Labour Party is in right now and their future going into the next election. Now, just as a disclaimer, this video is meant to be analytic and objective and not to argue for any sort of political agenda or viewpoints. Now, it's important to ask ourselves, how do we get into this position? Now, let's take a look at the last UK election before the current Labour victory. So going back into 2019, the Conservatives won 365 seats. Labour was down 60 seats into the low 200s territory. Now, this was an absolute disaster for Labour. It was their worst election result since the 1930s. Their leader, Jeremy Corbyn, had to resign in disgrace. And at that point, all of the pundits, all the people who follow politics had all predicted that the Conservatives would be in power till the 2030s and that Boris Johnson was going to be prime minister for well over 10 years. But then let's just take a look at some of the polling after that. And that Conservative support that they won in the 2019 election held. If you look as we get into early 2020, their support actually went straight up. They peaked in support during COVID, as most incumbent governments did. The issue is that as time went on, especially as you got into the Partygate scandal, that's when you saw Labour narrowly jump ahead in the polls, and that lead grew and grew and grew up until you get to this huge spike here around August to September of 2022. Now, just as a reminder, this is when Liz Truss was prime minister for about a month. And this was the peak of Labour and their support. And after this, it gradually did go down. But as you can see, it never went away. Labour held this 20-point lead for the rest of the election. And if you take a look at the last UK election where they won 365 seats, just look at that map. Look at how blue this map is. There are some red dots here and there in London and Liverpool and some of the cities. There's some yellow up top here for the SNP, but that is a blue, conservative, dark blue, deep map. And take a look at the 2024 map. Look at all of that blue just disappear. Central UK, around London. And the blue that does remain has been reduced in this light, much narrower shades of blue. Just one more time. Look at that shift. Labour would capture 411 seats. The Conservatives would lose 251 seats. They would be down to just 121 seats, the lowest in their party's history. Now, this election was a year ago. As I'm recording this, it's July 17th, 2025. And let's look at what's happened since then. A straight shoot down in public support for Labour. And no rise amongst the Conservatives. They're still way down. They're actually lower right now than they were during the election, which is impossible to think about. But look who surged ahead. That turquoise blue line of Reform UK. Now, how exactly did we get here? Because Labour has just failed to deliver on everything it was elected to do. For example, back in April, when the Supreme Court said that in the eyes of the law, trans women were not women, Starmer didn't challenge it, didn't say anything in opposition to it. He just said that he agreed with the decision and went along with it. Now, the Labour Party is a center-left party, but they're still a left-wing party with millions of voters who would like to see at least some rhetorical or verbal support for issues like trans rights. And another example of Starmer and Labour abandoning some of their more traditional, socially progressive, more left of center voters is on the Israel-Palestine issue. When Starmer was running for prime minister back in the spring of last year, in 2024, he often talked about his support for formally recognizing a Palestinian state. And now, over a year later, in July of 2025, that still has not happened. In fact, he's now actively resisting calls to do so, even to the objection of several unions who normally support Labour and even many of his own MPs. Now, to back up my point here, let's take a look at the 2017 UK general election. Keep in mind, an election where Labour lost. In this election, Labour won, in terms of the popular vote, 12.8 million votes. Let's take a look at the next UK election in 2019. Like I said before, the one where Labour got absolutely massacred, they still carried 10.2 million votes. Now let's take a look at 2024, where they won. Only carried 9.7 million votes. The reason for this is because under Starmer, the party saw a shift to the right, and not in the same way that Tony Blair did under New Labour. This was a complete ideological shift to the right from the Jeremy Corbyn years, and that led to decreased support for Labour amongst more left-wing individuals, of which there are many in the UK. And now let's just take a look at where this has gotten us. This is a map of the currency projections based off of the current polling we've seen. And take a look at this. Reform would capture 281 seats. Now keep in mind, they won 5 seats in the last election. A gain of 276 seats. Labour, who won 411 in the last election, would be down to just 140, a loss of 271 seats, the greatest loss of any party in modern UK politics. And the Conservatives, of course, down to only 61, losing half of their MPs. And this gets even worse when you factor in that our old friend Jeremy Corbyn has now created, alongside another suspended Labour MP, Zara Zoltana, a new left-wing party designed at addressing the needs of left-wing Labour voters. And look at the effect it's going to have. When you factor in the old seat projection I just showed you with this new Corbyn party, the Corbyn party only captures 21 seats. Now, you may not think that's a lot, but look at what it does to Reform. They go up to 442 seats. That's a gain of 437 seats. Labour falls to just 45 seats, a loss of 366 seats. This is due to the fact that the Jeremy Corbyn party would split the left-wing vote and leave Labour in this disastrous position, holding the 4th most amount of seats. The Lib Dems, in this scenario, with only 48 seats, would end up becoming the official opposition. So the question now becomes, how does Labour turn this around? Now, option number 1 would be Starmer goes back to what he campaigned on, and this is some genuine left-wing agenda. But as you can tell by recent news, Starmer suspended 4 Labour MPs who didn't go along with his welfare bill, which is on economic policy. Good luck getting him to change on social policy. Or option 2, introduce Angela Rayner. Now, Angela Rayner is currently the deputy leader of the Labour Party, so basically she's second in command to Starmer. Now, she is by no means far left. She's not a Corbynite. However, she does identify as a socialist and is definitely much bolder and much more progressive on some social issues. Now, this wouldn't be without precedent. Take a look back at Margaret Thatcher. Now, Thatcher won several elections going back to 1979 when she first became Prime Minister. She won a second term in 83 and then another term in 87. And then in 1990, she then resigned and handed it off to her deputy, John Major, who ended up winning the election and still carrying the Conservatives to another win. You can also see this under the last time there was a Labour government. In 1997, when Tony Blair won in a landslide, he was then re-elected in 2001, re-elected to a third term in 2005, but then, as you can see, in 2010, by that point he had stepped down, allowed for his deputy, Gordon Brown, to become Prime Minister, and then served it out. So it isn't without precedent to have your deputy or chancellor to step up and take over your job as Prime Minister after you resign during a second term. So yeah, those are just some of my general thoughts and opinions on the current state of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, especially with an emphasis on their future going into the next UK election, which will most likely be sometime in the spring of 2029. And thanks for watching.